Okay.
Oh, come on, Karima. Tufan, Tufan. You can do it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. A big hello and welcome to everybody who's just tuned in. My name is Garima. I'm a part of the team at Emodite, which is a venture that is geared towards helping people develop their emotional intelligence. The agenda of this webinar is to understand our relational selves. Why is it that being in contact with other people is so important for our mental well-being? What happens when our relational needs are not met? And also to answer questions like why is it important to develop an identity that is not based on our relationships with others? And what can we do to erect healthy boundaries between ourselves and other people? This webinar will end with a perspective of how these processes and explorations of identity, of being with other people, unfold for people who are part of the LGBTQ community. Hopefully, with the intention that we can also, like, all of us can take away some tidbits to become a little more sensitive, to become a little more informed about what it is that different kinds of people go through. And so let's begin. I'd like to introduce you all to the first panelist of the webinar, which is Ms. Shriparna Gogoi. Shriparna is currently pursuing her master's in counseling psychology from Xavier's College, Mumbai. So she's a counseling psychologist in training. And her field of interest lie in positive psychology, in health psychology, social psychology. And she plans to work with the geriatric population in future. So without any more delay, can we please have Shriparna on the spotlight?
All right. Thank you, Garima, for that very flattering introduction. Basically, my task here is to allow for some amount of theoretical understanding of what we really mean by relational self. Why are we talking about it in the context of COVID-19? What implications lie with regard to the kind of boundaries we have with people, the kind of personal space we share with them? So, to make the drier bit slightly more interesting to say, I have to share my screen and I will be uh, presenting something visually. Please say I if you can see my screen.
I can see.
Okay, great. All right. So the presentation is called With or Without You. Again, it was one of my attempts at making this more interesting. It's Theory of Relational Self and its relevance during COVID-19. So first of all, we need to understand where is all this coming from? What is the idea behind this whole construct of the selves and the relational self, and why do we need to talk about them? It's all rooted in self concept. At the bottom, I've sort of tagged it along. It's not shown right now, but basically, what it means is that if these your self concept is basically the kind of things that you believe about yourself. It's things that separate you from others, separate the kind of relational bonds that you have with other people, as well as the collective sort of intergroup identity that you share with other people. There are three different cells, and if you want to look more on the topic, you can go through Anderson and Chen's research, who've done a major part of all of these studies. So first comes the individual self. This is one's unique side. The self representation is of attributes that make you different from other people. For example, what do you believe about pineapple on pizza? Things like that. And a better example would actually be your qualities, your traits, whether you're a more introverted person, more extroverted person, what kind of belief systems separate you from a person sitting next to you. The second bit is about collective self. It's one's intergroup self. Here you have shared attributes with intergroup members, and these are distinctive. Basically, it's more of an impersonal but larger collective identity where the self representation is of membership in valued groups. Like, for example, what are the kind of memories as a millennial that separate you from Gen Zs? Things like watching a certain TV show in the 2000s. But today we'll be specifically focusing on the relational self. Now, a relational self is one's interpersonal side. Here you have attributes that you share in personal relationships. For example, relationships with your peers, your romantic partner, your parents, your siblings. There are also separate roles in these relationships, like the kind of interactions you have with your parents. What kind of role do you assume as a child, as opposed to the kind of role that your parent has? At the same time, the self representation here is of valued interpersonal attachments. And all three representations, by the way, for the benefit of this presentation, are contextual, which basically simply means that which kind of self, relational self, or individual self, or collective self you take on to describe your self concept better is all contingent on the kind of situation that this description comes from. Now, what is the similarity between these three selves? The similarity is that these are all value laden constructs, meaning you value the kind of person you are. You value the kind of interpersonal relationship you have. You value your membership in the group that you belong to. And the difference between collective self and your relational self is that a collective self is more impersonal in nature, whereas a relational self is more dependent on one-on-one interpersonal relationships. Now, here's the real context of relationships during the COVID-19. To jump straight into it, we have to look at the first most obvious implication of COVID-19, which is physical proximity. Our social environment has certain implications due to the physical limitations that have been imposed on them. But there is a paradox here of comfort and sort of discomfort. And I do not mean only the dichotomy of introversion and extroversion. A lot of contemporary studies before the pandemic have actually largely emphasized on healthy physical boundaries benefiting relationships. But if we were to talk about times now, things could not have been more unexpectedly different. The first point of contention is that what happens when your basic physical needs have not been met. For example, positive strokes like a human touch, a handshake, or even physical proximity with other individuals, like just sitting in the same room and probably not even having a conversation with each other. As well as things become trickier when you're kind of physically isolated alone. For instance, you're just helpless, you're being shut down in a city where you can't move out and you can't go back home, or you can't go to somebody who you can live with or share space with, or staying with parents, peers, and partners. How do you then draw healthy boundaries? Also, another issue in urban areas, especially, is the lack of physical space for self. When you're sharing space with somebody, but there's very little space for you to do your work and for you to actually even be at peace. Also, what happens when there is tension in relationship, where you're not comfortable with the person you're sharing spaces with? How do you then say no without hurting the other individual? Another point of contention here that I would like to bring about is social needs. Now, how fundamental is it really for our social needs to be met? And as debatable as Maslow's hierarchy of needs is with regard to its hierarchy itself, our need for love and belongingness are quite basic, and it has been like a larger agreement for a long time now. And can they be fulfilled online then? Can you really replace an entire construct of physical interaction with another person with just online interaction that's completely virtual? And what happens when these relationships that you're sharing physical space with aren't as important as the ones that you aren't sharing space with physically? For instance, maybe you derive more emotional comfort and social comfort from your romantic partner than with your parents, but you're in lockdown with your parents. How do you make up for that sort of lag? And here's something that really comes about as a rescue, for instance, and has shown in surveys, is that a lot of shared activities have been formed. Like, for example, there is this game called Covidopoly online, which is basically for people who are obsessed with Monopoly, like myself. You're welcome. And the game basically works on the idea that even though you may not physically meet each other, there are these other avenues with which you can come together and share common interests. And lastly, like I was saying, the commonality between the three selves is that you're motivated to maintain these relationships because they are value laden constructs. So, what happens when the effort to maintain these relationships through virtual connection has been toppled over? Because otherwise, if you're talking about your classmates who you're also friends with, you can always go to class, and there is, of course, this physical interaction that happens. When that option is not there, you really do have to open that group chat that you've muted for a year and go through those conversations to know what happened to X from neuroscience. And that's not something that you're going to avoid if you want to maintain those kind of relationships. Now, here is the deal with another construct that has been rather political in today's time and age, which is personal space. And it's a perspective on choices, and I'm going to present it as matter of factly as possible. Personal space has various sort of underpinnings to it. And I think the most basic one here is that it has a subjective understanding for everybody. What means personal space to somebody who is comfortable, fortunately, in a metropolitan city and has enough space for themselves will look very different as a choice of physical isolation than somebody who does not have a roof over their head. And unfortunately, so this is true for a large part of the population in India. At the same time, even if you are fortunate enough to have a roof over your head, there are a few things that come about which make this sort of balance slightly complicated. For instance, if you don't want to engage in a conversation because you haven't seen another human face in like 3 4 months, and your partner wants to engage in a conversation, how do you say no to that person without sort of creating a rift between the two of you? And when the other person actually wants to engage in conversation, what happens when the two of you want that sort of personal space but don't know how to ask for it? Also, you have to understand that during the pandemic, you're also dealing with dyadic pressures if there are tensions in the relationship without personal space, as well as individual stressors. Individual stressors like what happens if I get tested positive? With the whole media hype around the concept that, oh, if you get tested positive, we don't know what next. And even though scientifically it's possible that things change, studies change, research will say different things at different points of time, the larger idea is that people are scared, and you are then dealing with a double-edged sword of the stigma of infection and also just fighting with the disease itself. Also, another thing that came about to be what I would like to unfortunately call calorie damage was just unhealthy relationships springing out. If you are in that close space with another person, you don't share a very healthy relationship with, it can get very difficult and very mentally exhausting to share that space. And this is also true for family tension and feuds. Now, I will go on to the next part of my presentation, which will be slightly lesser on the theoretical component. And here is me reflecting on the pandemic. So the first thing I need to talk about here is the inner critique. This is something that comes about extremely strongly when I talk about loneliness during the pandemic. Um, Emotions by themselves don't have the capacity to last for a very, very long time. Emotions like sadness, emotions like anger. Basically, Linehan from DBT, dialectical behavior theory, she says that they are like one of these boards on which your luggage comes at the airport. They come and go. When they last longer, it's usually because you have cooked on those emotions because you're constantly ruminating over what happened. The idea here is then to know when to stop, to know when to draw that line between thinking about what happened and constantly ruminating over what happened and what could have been different. Also understand that a lot of negative thoughts like I don't deserve to be paid attention to because somebody didn't return your DM are usually very automatic and will seem very common, but they are not usually true. Another factor that has been proven to be quite beneficial actually in the context of the in general context in positive psychology is counting blessings. Being grateful for something like I grabbed the last packet of Maggie from the grocery store somehow helps because you're consciously shifting your focus from things that went wrong or could have gone wrong to things that have gone right. And this actually helps in breaking the cycle of rumination and stopping your thoughts from spiraling further. And lastly, accepting the new norm. I will stop the presentation here. I'll talk about the last point in where I share my story about how I dealt with the pandemic. I call that part a tale of two cities because I didn't know what else to call it. And I will now stop sharing my screen. Right. Okay. Right. So basically, like Garima mentioned, I stay in Bombay, and I could not come back before I had the opportunity to. And initially, I was this very precocious sort of conscious person who felt like I had everything under control. So I was stocking up on groceries and I was doing things right. But at the same time, I felt like there was a lot that I was missing out on simply because I didn't have any human contact for a very long time. And by that, I simply mean that I live alone. So talking to my parents online or talking to my friends online just didn't suffice, which is why I remember, as soon as the lockdown was announced, I sort of packed a few bags and I moved, what can be called next door. But by next door, I mean 5 minutes away in Bombay, which happened to be somebody I was seeing for a very short period of time before that. I was seeing him for 3 months before that, I think, 2 months. And he used to live alone as well. And somehow everything went wrong in the first few days. Like there was a quick succession of things that could have gone wrong and went wrong. Nothing was in my control. I broke my phone, I broke my laptop, and context here, I do all my work on my phone. So when my phone was gone, I had two things pending. I had a dissertation to finish, and I also had a case file to finish. I panicked, and I'm usually the one dishing out advice to my family members and always consoling them for things. But I remember during that time, I just broke down and I said, I can't do this anymore. And I remember picking up the phone like a 3-year-old child who's just broken her arm and saying, I cannot and I need to go back home. And I was really expecting to be back home quite early, but things didn't work out. And but somehow showing my vulnerabilities that night sort of allowed my partner to take on my now partner to take on the reins of control and become the calmer person in the room. He said, take my phone, log into your email, download all your files, and do your work. And that came as a surprise because I've never seen somebody else take control of things. And so we picked up the pieces, one at a time. We tried to pull ourselves together as much as we could anyway. On other occasions, being vulnerable and not having things under my control would perturb me. But here I knew that there was anyway very less I could do. So worrying about it was not going to make things any better or solve my problem any which way. And that is when I started rewriting a few stories that I've always told myself. And I think the first one I rewrote was about asking for support and being okay with asking for help when I'm not self-sufficient. And it's okay to be not self-sufficient all the time. I did not first wait my partner to ask me or to read my mind and say, oh, you know what? He or she should know what I'm thinking about right now. I asked for the support I needed at that time. Another one was about just being vulnerable in itself and being less than okay. And I don't just mean emotionally, I think even as human beings on a larger spectrum. For instance, I always prided myself on being efficient and productive with my day, but I realized that all the things I was stressing myself with, my courses, my internships, my career, they were just draining me out. So I decided to stop doing what was clearly not working. And I started with getting enough sleep. So I would sleep for as long as I wanted, and this happened for a long time. This happened after a very long time. And the moment I started doing that, I realized I was less cranky, and I started actively avoid engaging in conversations and sort of, I don't know, just like simple plain conversations on the phone with other relationships, and being okay with conversations online on the phone. Things I have avoided for a very, very long time. The confrontation I had avoided for a very long time. And even with that sort of a relationship, with that sort of a connection with other people, I did carve out my own space for myself at the end of the day. This happened with friends, this happened with parents, this happened with relatives for that matter. Another thing I found very difficult initially, but somehow managed, was finding healthy boundaries. And I have to give credit to my partner for this because he struck a balance really. But this was an issue that we addressed very early on. We asked for support when we needed some, but we also asked for breaks very openly because we realized that the other person doesn't telepathically know that we need that space. And this is not to say that every person I know will, and this is also to say that every person you meet will know automatically what you need. Sometimes it's okay to say it out loud. And lastly, I realized that relationships like with relationships, just like people aren't always perfect, they are almost never perfect. And not everyone is going to be on their best selves at all points in time, and I'm bound to make mistakes. And I realized if I just acknowledged how human individuals can be and how they are on their own sort of journeys of growth, I will be able to forgive them more easily and more often when they slip up. And that sort of relieves me personally, at least. I stayed with my partner for almost 2 months before coming back home on a bus from Bombay to Assam. It took me 5 days to reach home. And while that journey is a story in itself, while I reached home, I realized that I had come back with a few things. Fortunately, not the virus. Um, One, I had come back with a promising and a healthy relationship, which may be untimely mellow because we stayed together for such a long time. But it had a very pleasant underpinning of friendship, which was missing in my earlier relationships because of the same context, and also love. And two, I think my longing for relationships apart from a romantic relationship increased. For example, friendships that I had given up on, for instance, I hadn't spoken to for a very long time. And my relationship with my parents, maybe because of the age or whatever, but it was somehow easier to have agreeable conversations on things I wouldn't have brought up before, like politics. And lastly, some sort of respect for myself. So much so that I had finally stopped feeling bitter about a breakup, a very not so nice breakup that I didn't realize until the lockdown bothered me so much when I had the time to stop and think what had gone wrong. The thing is, if anything could go wrong, and it automatically did, me worrying about it wasn't going to change things. Or unlike what misconceptions will tell you, worrying about it wasn't preparing me either. It was just making things worse and for a longer period of time than it would have. So if I were going to do something at all, maybe it would be better to do them because I truly wanted to. I started my own blog after I came back home, which I've been writing religiously for 2 months at a stretch, and that hasn't happened before. I derive a lot of personal satisfaction and comfort from that. I started sketching again for myself and also painting. And if my patience allows, maybe I'll start reading a book again from the next month. My point is, if the virus could put a halt to apparently invincible metropolitan cities, it could also make me realize the value of smaller things and the journey that I think just started with myself. Yeah, thank you for being such a patient audience.
I think I have never seen a better example of how we make meaning of life when things are crumbling around us. And, it's one thing to focus on the positive things and the good things and the little things that Shripanna clearly did. But it also takes tremendous courage to address the things that are not going right in life and, reframing them, reconfiguring yourself and those problems to, develop a different perspective on life, which is, if I'm not wrong, some part of narrative therapy as well, where, you rewrite what is your life story per se. And with that channel, I think it's a really nice moment for Manvi to chip in now. Manvi is a practicing counseling psychologist and a narrative therapy trainee. She is also a certified happiness coach. And she fortunately is going to address a lot of open-ended questions that Shripanna introduced us to about, boundaries, about communication, about space for yourself, and just the experience of being in circumstances where you perhaps are not very comfortable. So I'm going to give the spotlight to Manvi now.
Yeah.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Garima, for such a lovely introduction. And I couldn't have been more happy to collaborate with you guys since I graduated from the same university. So I'm extremely excited. I think the first segment has covered a lot of things so beautifully. And I'm so glad that Shri Parna brought in the personal element to the whole bit that she had shared, which has opened up, which is sort of opening up that emotionally safe space for everyone to perhaps rethink and ponder over a lot of things, a lot of questions that cross our mind, which we may not be paying that much attention to by thinking, okay, is it good to think about it? Is it fine to think about it? Or am I overthinking? So I'm going to build on the aspects that Sriparna introduced in her PPT and also from her personal experience by amalgamating therapeutic experiences of individuals, so that all of you will also get a taste of what exactly happens in a therapeutic setup. Being an ardent advocate of therapies for everyone, and while being a therapist, undergoing therapy too, I believe self awareness is the key to understand what is going wrong and what is it that I can perhaps, how can I make things right. So I work with adolescents and adults. So I'm working at a residential school with adolescents, and at the same time, I'm a practicing psychologist. And in my therapeutic practices, I usually work with adults. So I'm going to build upon boundaries very specifically. And at the same time, when we speak of boundaries, I think the socio-cultural aspect is very important to keep in mind, because the kind of environment we brought up in, we were never introduced to something like boundaries. We as individuals, at least me being a 90s, being a 90 born person, I did not experience the idea of boundary. And since most of the clients that I work with, they fall from in that category, I think boundaries are very important.
Manvi, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, cool. So
The last thing I heard was that the people you see in therapy are from.
okay. Oh, we lost a lot of it. Okay, so people
Sorry.
that I usually see in therapeutic space, they fall into the age group of 20 to 30, which is adults. So keeping in mind the socio-cultural context, and as we've been taught in psychology that psychology is very cultural specific. So to be able to
Hmm.
understand where an individual is coming from, it is essential to be able to work out what are the things that a person can do and can practice in their interpersonal relationship. So I'm going to take an example of a student in the boarding setup. Since schools have reopened virtually, and especially with boarding, so in a boarding setup, the place where I am working, um, 80% of students who are there, they are there because of the family dynamics that they share with their parents. So a lot of them are separated, a lot of them are on the verge of getting divorced, and the environment is not very healthy for them. So that way, for their well-being, they've been put in boarding, because again, parents are also trying to figure it out. So the environment they're coming from is not the best of the environment, I would say. And 20% of them are because of the nature of work that their parents are involved in. Some of them are NRIs and they have to travel a lot, and which is why they do not want their kids to be facing any struggle in their academic life. So, keeping that in mind, the crux of the matter is that the students, most of them, are not used to staying with their parents. They are not used to sharing spaces with their parents. And right now, when they are coexisting under the same roof, there are a lot of concerns that are cropping up. So I'll give an example. Recently, a student of mine was speaking to me, and he has been dating a girl since a very long time. And I think this has been a person. This is a this is an experience that a lot of I think high schoolers must have experienced, that their parents do not approve of whosoever they are seeing. And sometimes they don't realize that we are not even asking for that approval. So it's my choice who I want to see, and I'm not out there getting married to that person. So the moment, and again, it has got a lot of cultural context also, that they are worried. Of course, they do care, but in that process of caring, those boundaries are somewhere not drawn, and they seem very blurry. So the student was sharing. So the father reached out saying that he's been very rude and he's being very disrespectful, and I'm not very happy with, and I'm also very worried. So he's been speaking to you earlier, so it would be better if you could just speak to him and understand. So I spoke to him, and he shared this with me, and he's a multitasker. He's an extremely intelligent child who is doing brilliantly well. He's studying, he's developing apps, and he's interning at 3 places. He's working on his community project, so he's doing every possible thing possible. And he shared that at night I talked to her, And whenever I talk to her, then they start saying that you're all the time on phone. Because his work, he has taken up science and he is interested in um, user experience, user design. So he will be on phone. It's very natural for him to spend more time on phone. And it's not that all the time he is talking to her or all the time he's just working. So he shared that they keep sharing that, you can't, in boarding, you used to get 1 hour of phone time. So here we're going to give you 2 hours and then we want our phone back. So he said, how do you want me to feel that I am at home when you're going to be applying the same rules at me? And in boarding, I got a lot of more space. So it's not done. And I think anyone commenting on anyone's partner or anybody who we are interested in is not a good experience. So of course he's had an outburst, because that's something that we are also working upon, which is emotional regulation and expression. So when I spoke to the father, that's what I shared with him, that and when I spoke to the son also, then we had a combined session that for adults, and I think this is for most of adults and adolescents too, if you want to be treated like an adult, then act like one, right? And for
Mm.
parents, if you want to treat your children, or if you want them to act like adults, treat them also like adult. Okay, let them be adults. So that's an understanding that both the parties have to understand. And by acting like an adult, shared responsibility is something which is an essential part. Since right now, at this point in time, there is no extra help which is provided, right? And a lot of parents are also struggling with their job, with the housework, domestic chores that they have. Similarly, even students are struggling with this whole paradigm shift of turning into a virtual world, which is not, I don't think a lot of them are happy and are fully content with the kind of interaction they're having. And I'm sure you would understand that, because in government university, it's not even happening. Online classes seem to be a far-fetched dream. Yeah, so we have our results coming out so late on general days. So having online classes is also a privilege for a lot of people. So
Yeah.
keeping that context in mind, having a conversation um, that this person is going to date whosoever he or she wants to, but would you want to jeopardize your relationship with your son? So one thing that we worked upon was that give him that space, and you would not get to know what he's doing until you don't communicate. And like Shri Parna spoke about how important and integral communication is, the way we communicate is also very important. So I'll give you a simple example. This had happened in a setup where this woman, this 26-year-old woman, who's sharing her space with her partner, she shared this with me, that there were a lot of that she shared that we are having a very hard time. We thought we were made for each other, and right now we are stuck with each other, because I can't go out, he cannot go out, and we have to be under the same roof. So when we got into the nitty gritty of how things are being communicated, for a simple example, if there is a house rule, a kitchen rule, and it's very essential for everyone to understand, if we are living in a house, there are going to be house rules. And when we speak of house rules, they need to be made by everyone, not just one person who's deciding that my house, my rules, if you follow it, well and good, otherwise just get lost. So that doesn't work. If everyone is staying, let everybody also contribute. So it needs to be a, you know, a dialogue needs to happen. Protest may not always help. One needs to engage in a dialogue. And I think engaging in a dialogue is one thing which I essentially work a lot with my clients. How do we communicate? So coming back to this little anecdote, she shared that they have a house rule that whosoever is making tea, if somebody is making food, then the other person is going to wash the utensils. And it kept happening, and she's very particular about cleanliness, especially in the kitchen area. Twice thrice it happened that her partner did not wash the utensils. So instead of conveying that we've had a discussion that you're going to do the dishes because I'm cooking, and I've been observing that you're not doing dishes, this is the cause of the problem. But instead of communicating the problem, the person ends up saying, you are so sloppy, you don't get anything in your head, are you hard of hearing? So we a person is being judged and being given that label that he or she is sloppy, he or she is hard of hearing, he or she is lazy. And at this point in time, these small comments, they appear very small. And I think even with parents, when they say things like you are so lazy, they have no idea how a child might be internalizing all those things, that those comments, they might be internalizing it, that okay, I am lazy. And then we see self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Okay, you think
Yeah.
I'm lazy, I'm lazy, I'll show you what being lazy means. So it's like a whole cycle, and it needs to be broken. It can be broken only when we are able to communicate how I'm feeling. So a very basic example can be using I statements. I feel. So insert emotion, right? So I usually share this template with a lot of people. Use I, insert emotion, and whatever your problem is, and what do you expect from another person. So
Mm.
I been feeling irritated because you've not been washing dishes. Can we can we talk about it? That opens up an avenue to have a discussion, rather than, because I don't think any discussion would take place and the other person would be in a defensive mode if you say that you are sloppy, you are lazy. So that communication is something which has helped a lot of people in being able to redraw boundaries. And when we are talking about relational self, of course, for adolescents who are sharing their spaces, there is a very basic socio-cultural connotation related to being home and staying with family. Automatically a person perceives that घर पे रह रहे हैं तो they are absolutely safe, which may not be the case. Safe space is never defined by your parents, by your family members. It's about also that maybe physically they might be safe, emotionally they may not be feeling safe. So initially, even when as an individual, if you are also communicating with your friends, ask them how they are doing, rather than using statements like, at least you are living with your family members, what if this
Mm.
had happened. So those what ifs, that if they are not really helping that person feel any better. So to have a conversation, and I'm sure that at this point in time when we are communicating to people, um, our idea is to ensure that they are doing fine, and also to fulfill our emotional needs at the same time. So to keep these things in mind, that these are also pockets of reality, the communication would actually roll out in the same way, while we are aware that what are different pockets of reality. Another thing that I would really want to talk about is related to values. So while Shriparna spoke about, when we talk about personal space, and of course, there are diversified families. There can be houses where there is little space and there are more individuals, right? So of course, we are looking at a different kind of family background, different family structure, where there can be joint families. So in that space where so many people are coexisting, how do I find my safe space? So one
Yeah.
of the things that my clients and I have worked out, and rather my clients have shared, that the innovative ways where they're able to find a spot for themselves where they can feel little safe, they can feel little calm, which we usually call a calming corner or a safe corner. So it could be, so for instance, this, I see it as a calming corner for myself. I see it as a safe space. So you can keep things that are important to you, that makes you feel good, that makes you feel calm. So this painting was given to me by a student, and I like to keep it here. These are certain gifts that were given to me by my students. I like reading books. So this is the space where I sit and work. And at the same time, I make sure I don't eat here. So redefine spaces in your houses. Even if there is a space crunch, try to redefine, try to embark different spaces and assign different spaces, that okay, this is going to be a space where I will be having my tea, where I'll be relaxing. This is the space where I'm going to work, because your brain is going to get adapted to that environment at the same time. So the moment when I'm here sitting, I know that I'm supposed to work, that I have to work. And at the same time, if I'm going to be eating, talking, doing everything, it would be difficult. So to redefine spaces, unexplored spaces in your house, is something that can be benefited a lot. It has benefited a lot of individuals. So that is something that can be done, which is, you can call it a calming corner, a safe corner, anything which you feel like calling it. And the third most important part that I want to talk about is emotional regulation, which is relational self, like we've already discussed. It is in my identity in association with my relationships, right? So at the same
Yeah.
time, virtually or even physically, um, it's very essential to understand that there exists a sense of my own self in every relationship, right?
Mm.
And especially in interpersonal and romantic relationships, statements like he's mine, she's mine, I am yours, right? Language has a very important implication in terms of how we think and how we act upon. So of course there can be a lot of love between parents and their kids, there can be a lot of love between any relationship, but to have that boundary and to have that sense of self that I am a separate individual and I am a whole and complete individual. So when we are together, it's a partnership. So I
Mm.
am not a broken piece who's looking for another piece, right?
Yes.
So that understanding that I am whole in my own sense of self is very essential to understand, to acknowledge, and even to apply. So to give yourself that personal space that, okay, maybe I'm not in a space to speak to you right now. I care about you, but I've had classes for like last 5 hours. I need an hour. And can I get back to you in some time? And even in family. So one of the clients who had come to me had shared that she experiences a lot of emotional exhaustion, and she was in therapy for about 3 months, and there were different facets that we had covered. But one of the major learnings and one of the major goals that we established and somewhere she was able to fulfill and she's still practicing was drawing boundaries with her mother. As much as there is love and care, to be able to understand, to be able to communicate that I feel your pain, I see you, I can hear you, but I need some time to be able to be with you, because I also have a lot of things, and as much as I want to be with you, I need some space, give me some time. So it's very difficult to communicate those things, and a lot of people even see it as being selfish. So am I being selfish at this point in time when I'm asking for my space? So um, let's imagine that, whenever a person is angry, and I think right now those distressing emotions of anger, frustration, and irritation is very normal. So to be able to understand that there is a sense of loss that all of us are experiencing, that normalizing it is grief that all of us are going through. And when a person is going through a sense of loss, there would be these distressing emotions too. And by that I don't mean that all of us are sulking every day. There have been moments of gratefulness, there have been moments of being thankful that at least we are able to have this conversation right now and people are able to hear us. It shows that we fall into the privilege section. We have net connection, and we are able to take that time out, we have a space to have this conversation. So to be able to have that gratitude and express that gratitude in daily life is somewhere is keeping a lot of people going. But coming back to those distressing emotions, I usually use this example that whenever you see that there's a building on fire or anything is on fire, usually whenever a fire brigade comes, it waits for the fire to go a little down, right? They just don't pull their extinguishers and water pipes out right there. They wait for the fire to at least settle a bit, and then only the water will have an effect. So, similarly, if you see yourself having that emotional check in that we do, if you see yourself, if you spot yourself feeling extremely furious, take a break, give yourself a time. Just tell a person that I'm really angry, I need some time off. Because a lot of times it happens that when a person is angry, the other person might think that, okay, is he or she testing me, that if I'm going to come after this person or not? What if
Mm.
this is the test for me, that am I there for this person or not? So like Shri Parna said, that everybody has a lot going on, and nobody want to get involved in telepathic conversations. And we are not mind readers. As much as people say psychologists are also mind readers, we are not. Nobody's a mind reader, right? So at the same time, taking a break and also giving somebody that break, that okay, just imagine, just try to imagine and give a mental image that okay, the building is on fire. The extinguisher will only do some work till the time the fire doesn't, the flames don't settle down. So that way, emotional regulation is something where people and individual will benefit in maintaining their well-being, because at the end of the day, we are all a separate individual, and there exists a sense of self apart from being in relationship or whatever role that we are playing. So these are the things that I wanted to talk about and probably draw from my therapeutic practices. And I'm really looking forward to questions that people have around these. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I have definitely absorbed a lot of things that I will definitely start implementing, beginning which I should not eat on my bed and also work on my bed at the same time. But interestingly, your anecdote about how, parents are not very comfortable with who we date and the personal choices we make if they don't overlap with our cultural expectations and our understandings is something that uh, that genuinely does affect heteronormative people, but also maybe affect people who identify with diverse sexualities much more. And I think this is the sort of segment that Devesh definitely tried to talk about through his feature on Humans of Bombay. Like, how an experience that goes against everything and anything that is expected can also bring, so many surprises and so many happy light moments, but also, a frame to reflect upon. We thought that A leads to B, but maybe C can also lead to B. So, I think in trying to understand how we can reconfigure our expectations about who we are and how the world works, um, I'd like to give the spotlight to Devesh now. And even though he's just 18, he's doing much more than what I was doing at 18. And so Devesh is a professional dancer, and he also works as a marketing agent. And he's been taking Zoom classes and Google Meet classes on jazz and ballet. So if you are a dance and fitness enthusiast, please go check him out. But I'll now be shifting the spotlight onto Devesh, and let's see what perspective he can add to this conversation. Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
Devesh.
hi. Thank you, Garima, for that wonderful introduction. I am extremely nervous because I've never done this, but yeah, I'm gonna be fine. I got lots of information from Manvi and Chuparna, and trust me when I say this, like I'm on the audience's side when it comes to this, because I'm here to talk about how I personally experienced a lot of these things in my relation, and we've just been together for a year or 2 months, but there was so much that Manvi and Chipana said that I was just like, oh, that I got that, yes, I need to do that's what I need to work on. Let me just start by telling you that I came out to myself when I was 15, and I had no idea what it was. Thanks to a few people who came in my life, I tried to explore that side of me, and I came out to my family a year after, which was due to not a personal thing that I wanted to come out, but it was due to a certain things that happened in my life that led to it. So there wasn't a personal decision of I think I should come out to my parents, but it was just a few problems that occurred in my life which led to me having to tell my parents, because I had nobody to share my personal experience and talk about my problems to. And I thought that moment, my parents were the people who I trusted the most. So I am going to be starting, I know it's a little abrupt, but I'm going to be starting with a very small activity. It's going to be like a questionnaire. Wherever you are, you can just do it. It doesn't have to be with anything regards to writing something. You just have to honestly answer it for yourself. I have a few questions listed here. I hope you don't mind me reading them because I don't want to miss out on any one of them. They're all
Okay,
really important. It would be great if even if y'all are interested, y'all can surely join in.
let's do it.
I'm just gonna be starting, and then what's the point of it? I would like to leave that up to you because I think the question will lead to what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna start with a few simple questions. Let's get slowly into it. Yeah. And the questions have to be answered honestly for yourself with just a yes and a no. Cool. Okay. Um, did you ever worry about your school grades? Yes. For sure. Did we ever get frustrated with homework? I have my brother in the other room, and he's just like, "Okay, I'm done. I'm done." Did you have a hard time juggling between what you want to do and what you had to do in with regards to your passion, your hobbies, with regards to your, whatever you want to do? I did it a lot because dancing as a career was, it yet is a stereotype. And next question is, did you have time management issues with regards to juggling between responsibilities of basic responsibility because you want some personal space at times. At times you need some time to do your homework. I went through that. Did you have a problem with self-confidence due to your appearance? A lot of people went through that. I have a lot of moments where I laugh at these questions because, like my like Manvi said, I do go to therapy, and she called it a devil's laugh. She said that you laugh it out because they hurt so much internally. But that's when I got to know. Okay, simple until now. Let's get a little more into it. Did you find puberty confusing? Hair coming out here, hair coming out there. Simple. Okay. Did you have problems socially interacting with new people who you've never met before in your life? Did you have poor sleeping habits? Okay. Okay, this is my favorite one. Did you love somebody and have them not love you back? Okay. Did you get bullied? Okay, let's get a little more specific now. Did you get bullied due to your sexual orientation or identity of how you chose to express yourself in form of art form or in form of your creativity? Did you get scolded by your parents not because you were spending too much time on useless things that they said, but because it was what you asked them what it is like to feel attraction to somebody of the same gender? Did you face the extra pressure of having to plan an official coming out to your parents and the people who you trusted the most? Did you ever have the risk of losing everything like your home, etc., after having to come out to your parents? Did you get bullied for acting or dressing up like the opposite gender?
Yeah.
Did you ever have to think twice before showing love to your partner in public? Last but not the least, were you asked to ever act normally? Normally. Okay. Why did I do this? One is to ask you, in fact, not to tell you, but to ask you what does normal mean to you and to your friends, to your family. What does normal mean? Because till date, I don't know what normal means, Second, I'm going to show you two papers. This is the first list of questions. I had a hard time writing them because I was just like, what were the hard times that I faced as a normal child, before I came out to myself? And these were so easy to write because I'm just like, I'm going through all of them. And let me tell you, as a normal kid, I went through this. But as a teenager or a kid from the LGBTQ community, I went through both of these. Yeah. And we know that we're already going through a lot of stuff. But I think breaking the norms in terms of having to come out as a LGBTQ community shouldn't be adding extra pressure to us. And by breaking those norms in other people's minds, it'll help the people coming in the new generation who are going to be coming out to their parents. So if a parent is open to the whole concept of what is it to be like, and what is it to be a normal kid and yet be through the LGBTQ community, is way easier because a parent will approach and support the kid in that certain way. Third, I was supposed to play a voice note here, but it's a sarcastic comment, but it was reality check. This activity was just to give you a check about the privileges we, being from the Indian community, Indian LGBTQ community, we have a lot less privilege compared to normal children. You know, because of the way we're treated. And why should we go through that because somebody doesn't understand us? Like as an artist, particularly as an artist, I would because I am an artistic contemporary dancer, we usually don't say yes with a thumbs up. Just an example, we don't say yes with a thumbs up. I can also say yes with a yes. Just an example. So the intention behind it, as an artist, I would never tell you by the end of the piece what it meant. I would want you to figure out where it took you. So there's no explanation, extra explanation that I would want to give you, because you know, it's my life. You have a certain aspect that you can judge in it, but there's a certain aspect that you cannot judge in it. You know, not consuming any more time on this. I would just like to tell you, if you're a parent or a guardian or a human who another human looks up to, I would just say love, understand, and change. Not change immediately, because I know there are a certain things that takes time to get into your system. So in the start, let me tell you personally what I did was, in the start, I never asked my parents that, I never told them. I actually told them, let me just be honest here. I actually told them that I'm very normal, and I want you to change your perception behind it, you know, because I didn't want to go to the mental stress that time. And later on, as time went by, I understood that there were moments when they were trying, but I never gave them a chance and the time to get used to it, get the understanding. And I never gave them an explanation of how normal it is. So I wanted to give them examples. I wanted to take them to therapies. I wanted to, you know, tell them that just having my parents by my side in terms of, you know, my sexuality, because that's how, you know, in a document, that's the first thing that comes. It's my name, my age, and my gender. So that's, if it's so important to the people outside, you can imagine how important it is to the person who I'm feeling inside. You know, so I needed them to understand how important it is, that you cannot tell me in a way that so I'm just going to give you an example in terms of, if my boyfriend has come over, I would like you to, if you're talking to me, just saying that bring your friend here. I would like you to, if it was my girlfriend who had come home, and if he'd call her a girlfriend, then I would want my friend to be called as a boyfriend too. You know, it's as simple as that. It's a small change, but it matters. It matters to me, because every time that you say that he's your friend, and even though I've told you that he's my boyfriend, it brings my level of support from my parents one step down. And then there's problems in terms of communication with my parents, because I feel like even though I've told them, there's a certain explanation that they've not understood in it. So I think as a parent, just let the child know, communicate that you need some time, you need to get used to it. So recently, it was just let's say 5 months back that my parents told me that, and I was like, perfect. That was just like, every time I went down step, every time they told me that, I just went back to where I was. You know, I felt like whatever I was trying was just coming to use. And coming to a question wherein people who are facing this, let me just tell you, I watched a video in terms of investments. Okay, it was just a task given to me, and the first, there's nothing regards to the investment part, but the lady said before she started the video was that shut the video if you feel like you're going to get anything or get returns without doing anything. You know, she said, if you want returns in terms of your savings bank, in terms of your FD, in terms of your recurring deposit, mutual funds, whatever, you need to work for it, you need to save for it, you need to put in the efforts. So let me just tell you, for the people who are facing this, you need to put in that much extra efforts until the time those norms are broken. Yeah, so I know hardships come, but you cannot just let them take over you. You need to make a plan for yourself and make your parents and your love system understand that you need the space to understand, and then I'm going to come back to you and talk to you about it, you know, and put in the efforts of gathering information of what you want to tell your. We joined the dancing art form so that we can get the leverage of expressing in a different way. But because of it being, there are a lot of there are a lot of companies that at times don't let you express in a way that we feel, because they're like, this part is for girls, this part is for boys. But because now there are a lot of new things that in, you know, dances are opened up, because I personally am a femme dancer and I don't want to be put in a part wherein I can do that part, but I don't feel myself doing it. So I'd like, you know, like, because I know for a matter of fact that the audience wouldn't mind seeing if I can do the part well. That's all the audience matters. So I don't think the companies should be holding any artist back in form of this, you know. So what happened was, we were in a relationship, and during our dancing career we left our dancing careers because the company was getting a little toxic for both of us, and it's okay to leave places. So left a lot of places before, but obviously the hardship of going to a new place, investing into it, was a lot more extra effort, but we had to take it because for our mental health the place was getting a little toxic in terms of the agreements and rules that they were coming up with. So just to be true to ourselves, we chose to leave, and we were freelancing. We were finding for other jobs. Meanwhile, the whole COVID crisis happened, and basically the first lockdown was a week before Atulan came home. And it was just like Shipana said. Shipana spoke about physical proximity of, you know, how he was feeling lonely at his homes. All his flatmates left for his home, but Atulan was the only one who was in that house, who was in that 1 BHK house alone. You know, it was just 2 days, and he was just like, I'm getting a little restless here. I am getting a little lonely. I am just left alone with my thoughts, with nothing to do, with nothing to look. For how long can a person Netflix, you know?
Yeah.
And so he was left alone, and I took that into account, and I tried to speak to my parents about the fact that, you know, he's alone, and I request you to take it into account right now and understand, because like I understand that I have to give them a little space in terms of understanding it, but the situation asks for a fact that I need to call him home right now because he's alone, and that time the flights weren't on, and he chose not to go back to Delhi because at that moment he felt like going back to Delhi, because he had such bad experiences back home in Delhi. He didn't feel uncomfortable. He had bad memories from Delhi, etc. So I took that into account, spoke to my parents. Obviously, they didn't listen in the first go, but like I said, I kept trying. Discussions, fights for a week, being very honest here. But somehow, luckily, my parents understood and they took it into account. Atalan came home, and in fact, my dad and me went to pick him up because there was no modes of transport. So my dad actually, you know, offered to pick him up, and I was just like, okay. We got home, and we were literally, I was sitting here, Atalan was sitting here, the TV is on, and I was just like, we looked at each other and we laughed, and we were just like, what just happened? We honestly didn't get that it could be possible with a lot of understanding and explanation and communication of how you feel. Like Manvi put it through in a really good way, that you need to make the other person understand what you're feeling for them to reflect upon it and do what you need to, you know. It's coming from, you know, staying away, there's a lot that comes into the picture that you have to think and decide about when you're staying together. The reality strikes in. There's a lot more different problems of staying together. Like Manvi said, you had to do dishes or whatever. There had to be a 24/7 physical connection, mental connection, and you having to see that person 24/7 is a lot more different compared to seeing him every day for 1 hour, 2 hours, or at times not seeing him. So that brought in a lot of changes, but thanks to Atalan, he actually put in, like, because of the fight that we went through, he actually put in and communicated that we had a communication problem. And lots of explanation went through, and we realized that there was a place where we were not meeting in terms of communication. So what we discussed, and it became like a normal thing for us to do, was that every time a problem came up, we would usually take, no matter how long it takes, but in one go we try to resolve it, or at least 90% be calmer as individuals. you know so usually we had these conversations at night, because being with a family, we cannot really be open about such things. So whenever we sat at night, we had to go through it, and even if it's like 5 6, we had to talk it through, just be 90% calmer at least. So that's what we did, that's what worked for us. And in terms of just around a month back, Atalan left back for Delhi, because like, there was, I had to respect my parents in terms of the part that he had to go back home someday. And at the same time, I agreed on my parents that he needed a little more family time, because for him to see his parents just once in years was difficult. So I was just like, you can use this at your most and spend some time with your parents, talk to them, let them know what you're going through, let them know what you're planning for the future, so they're in touch. And suddenly coming 24/7 for 4 months together, and then suddenly going to long distance was tough again. So but thanks, let me just, I am, like I said, you gotta put in the efforts, you gotta use the resources available around you to you know just solve these problems around you. So just an example, I would like to give you, and I'm going to wrap it up just now, Garima. And just the last example I'm going to give is that recently, in fact 2 days back, Atalan was feeling a little bit as if he was a burden on somebody, on his family members or me or anybody around him. And he at the same time felt a little underconfident, because not having to do anything, not having to put in your creativity or your skills in a place suddenly after 4 months is a little difficult. So what I decided was to help that, the best resource that I could think of. I know it wouldn't help him 100%, but just 10%, which I think in a relationship matters. So when I say that, I mean, I actually called his best friend. I asked her, do you think it's a good plan? And I told her the same thing, it won't help it, but I hope 10% or 5% he feels better. I asked all his close friends just to make a 1 minute video, using the technology around us. I tried to, use it in terms of our relationship. I made a video for him of, just told his friends to just tell him how worth he is. Because, at times we forget the worth that we deserve because of all the negative things happening around us. So we need a booster from the people who we trust. So I actually asked his mom, actually asked his dad, I asked his brother, I asked his best friends, asked all of them, and I'm actually clipping it right now. I'll be editing it and I'll be sending it to him. We're actually, so like I said, we're not really sorted. Like, in fact, we're literally on a break right now because of a few problems. But yeah, we gotta work through. That's it.
I think what I've gathered from all of you speaking and sharing your bits is how important it is to be proactive. So, proactive in the sense that you have to take an initiative to talk, you have to be open to let other people talk as well. You have to be proactive even in sharing your vulnerabilities, so that you can, communicate where it is that you need help and what is it exactly that you need from the other person. And I think we've painted a very nice trajectory of, what is it that all of us have been experiencing for these past couple of months. And it's offered me a lot of closure to listen to all of you speak of the ups and downs that you guys have been through, because I resonate with that at some level. And Manvi, of course, shared a couple of things that have really helped me introspect and reflect on the things that I can change as a person for myself towards a better end. Before we wrap up this session, I just like to direct a couple of questions to each of the panelists, so that we can have just a last, segment of final comments. It's not the most eloquent of questions, but somebody asked, what do you do with your stress if your family is the source of your stress and you live with your family 24/7? What do you do? Manvi, would you like to take this question?
Yeah, I think it's a very realistic question. And of course, there is a lot more that needs to be shared in this respect, in terms of has communication happened, and what are the possible causes of stress. But I feel to be able to sit down and talk about it, that I am feeling stressed. So, firstly, sharing, of course, there has been an acknowledgement that I am stressed out because of this. So, somewhere sitting down and conveying this to your family members, that I'm feeling very stressed out, right? So, using the I insert emotion, say how you're feeling, and share the whole thing, that what are the reasons that I am that are causing to my stress level, and what are the things that I'm trying to do, but at the same time it would require, like a team effort for me to sail through this time, to ride this tide. So somewhere communicating that, and again, communicating is like expressing what you feel, rather than in getting into the blame game mode, right? To be able to understand that this is what is happening. And I personally feel that the environment is also somewhere adding on to my stress. And then,
Mm.
let them also give them that time to first grasp that reality, that okay, this is a case. And then you go on sharing that, what are the things that are stressing you in a very specific manner, and at the same time, what is the support that you require from their end, and what is the expectation that they have from you. So somewhere at times, a lot of times, it also happens that things are there, they are boiling within me, but I'm just not conveying it. Like Aparajita shared that, to be self-sufficient, and that's something again I've seen in therapy, to be self-sufficient does not equate to being lonely and feeling alone. And being a self-sufficient person, being somebody who's capable of handling your own things, is inclusive of reaching out for help. So to be
Yeah.
able to question that cognition that we have, that if I'm reaching out for help, that means I can't handle. Of course, you can handle, and reaching out for help shows that you are handling the situation pretty well. So I think sitting down and having a dialogue will help. There can be family structures where the family members may not be welcoming to have this conversation. And like Devesh
Yeah.
said, that you have to put in that effort. You need to put in that effort. And I think after hearing the narrative that Devesh has shared, to imagine and to have that effort which came from his end, and also from his family's end, that okay, let's work it out, right? Let Devesh's boyfriend also come over, because maybe it would be helpful for him right now, and that would make Devesh also feel happy. So that effort needs to be constant. So if you really want something, you need to put that effort. So
That's
yeah.
a that's a very good, crisp response, and I think a summarization of your part as well. The one tangent that I really want to catch on to is that, sometimes you can make the best of efforts at communicating. You could be using iMessages, you could be using the best of tones, it could, be in the best of intentions, but sometimes the person that you're conversing with is not at a is not with the readiness to understand what you're saying. And sometimes you might be initiating conversations or going through with conversations that don't give you the kind of positive payoff you wanted them to. So, I was just thinking, Shipanna, if you might want to pitch in here, how do you reassure yourself that, it's okay to have tried? Maybe I'll try again. How do we keep ourselves going that, okay, if here a door was shut, should I be knocking again? I mean, what do we do with that dilemma then?
Okay, so people can have multiple perspectives on this actually, but what I felt really helped me through it is that I I reflected on why I felt so bad when somebody did not respond to it in a very respond to my questions or respond to my approach in a very positive manner. And by that, I simply mean just like the individual is not very open to conversation. Maybe they are saying something along the lines of, I don't want to have a conversation right now. And I realized that that made me feel really rejected.
Hmm.
And this is something that I take on even from a research perspective. I do think that feeling rejected has a lot to do with how we end up feeling when we are shunned into one corner or snubbed into one corner and not paid attention to. Having said that, I think this is something my professor said that really helped me understand this whole point. She said, what people do to you says more about them than it says about you. So when I sit there and I tell myself, this person is not engaging in a positive conversation with me because I am not worthy of having that conversation, of course, that anger is lingering somewhere. But beneath all that anger, if I'm feeling a lot of self doubt and a lot of inferiority and a lot of rejection, that just worsens it. So, if I am to understand the other person's trajectory while taking into account that, okay, I have done what I should have done, I have communicated my part, there is only so much I can do, there is only so much I can approach. And if I approach more, sometimes it sort of becomes like a pursuer cycle, like a pursuer escaper cycle. Basically, this is the thing that we do in family and systems therapy when you are approaching somebody, but because you're approaching them so much, they start escaping because they feel overwhelmed with the amount of emphasis that has been put on them. And I feel like to break that cycle, there is you need that sort of a bracket of time when both of you just have yourself, and for that tension to diffuse in itself is for that tension to diffuse in itself, I feel like both people require a breakout, like a sort of a breakdown, sorry, not a breakdown, a timeout sometimes. And I feel like
Yeah.
timeout really helps me cope with situations like this, because I also get to then actively distract myself with other things that can take up my resources and faculty.
Right. And, just hearing you talk, it reminded me of something that as we grow up, our mind is constantly evolving connections between A and B. You expect certain things to flow in a certain manner, and that sort of lays the foundation of how you navigate life, how you believe some things versus you don't believe some things, the kind of value you place on things. So I'm just thinking that, at 22, if I have certain understandings and expectations of the world, and somebody comes and just tells me that's a completely wrong way to think, that you've made a huge blunder by believing XYZ, it's actually like this, I'm going to be shook, to put it mildly. I'm going to be really, really shook, because everything that I've believed in or identified with up to a point has just been said that it's worthless, it's useless, it has no basis in society. So I'm just thinking that, if we can keep this perspective to ourselves and also keep this when we're engaging with older people, we should have some scope of understanding, of being kind, that, you are asking a person who's lived twice as many years to unlearn things that might be very, very difficult. I mean, unlearning is a very
Right.
uncomfortable process. And but definitely the kind of techniques and tips and structures that all three of you have given would definitely be like, a ladder, a climb, something you can hook onto every time you broach this topic or whatever subject with anybody. We've really spent a lot
Can
of
I just
time together.
pitch in something? With
Yes,
Oh, sorry. Is it over? I just needed to add something to it
that's
because I
fine.
felt like that was something that I should have brought up as well. When you spoke about, so this goes back to the theory I was talking about. The idea is that when you are indulging in self descriptions and self representations, the individual self in itself, the three self I was talking about, the individual self is reliant on the fact that you have to maintain balance and status quo. And by that, I mean you don't want things to change about you. What are things that make you up? Your qualities, your attributes, your belief systems. And when somebody challenges everything that you've believed in for the longest time, I feel like, as you rightly put, you're bound to be shaken slightly. And this comes from a conversation I was having with somebody who's really frustrated because he feels like the so he's around 60 and he feels like the younger generation really does not understand older populations. And I sat there listening to him, feeling so frustrated. And it was very easy to get angry with him. And I think I got angry. But then I realized this man is coming from a place of pain, anger, and hurt because he feels neglected. He feels like I am negating his opinion by saying that I have read more. That's why you don't know enough about what I have read. And he feels like his entire life's worth of experience is just useless. And
Yeah,
what helps, especially in therapy, is that when I'm talking to, so I interned last semester with adolescents and young kids. And while talking to their parents, I felt like what helped a lot is starting the conversation by saying, listen, you know the best about your kid. You know the best about your life. You know everything about your life. And of course, the age is a difference here. And age is a factor. You know more than me about a lot of things. I know a few things about my practice. So here is what we are going to do. We are going to keep that sort of a balance and then we're going to have this conversation. But
right,
you're absolutely right. I feel like that's something I did not touch on. Yeah, yeah.
right.
This
Okay,
sort of maintaining your own self. Yeah.
okay. Glad to know that what I think makes sense. Yes. Okay. So we've spent a lot of time together, and I personally had a very, very fruitful time with you guys, just listening to different people come together and sharing the little bits of themselves. And I'd really like to thank you all for spending so much time with us, going back and forth, finalizing this, and just coming to where we are right now. And for everybody who's watching this, I'd just like to say that we'll be giving you feedback forms very soon. And once you fill out those feedback forms, we can share the participation certificate letters with you. So please keep a lookout for that. Please fill them in if you require the letters of participation. And also request to please check out Emodite on Instagram. Please help us enlarge our community of people interacting with mental health. All four of us are on Instagram actually. Please go check out Homo sapiens tales. If I'm right, Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
Is that Manvi? Yeah,
Homo
right.
sapiens tale. Yeah.
Homo sapiens tales. And Shipanna also has a blog on Instagram. Please check out Devesh's page. Please ask him for dance classes. So leverage everything you can out of this session. And thank you so much for tuning in. Bye. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye,
Bye.
guys. Thank
Take
you.
care.